In this lesson, we'll learn how to speed up new drawings by using existing elements. So what we have right now in front of us, and what has happened since the end of the last lesson, is that all of those 3D elements that were pulled in from 3D Max have been flattened using the flatshot command. We have basically merged everything together exactly the way it had been done with the section. So I hadn't re-shown you the process for this elevation because it is identical to what I have done in the last couple of lessons while doing this section. What I did want to show you is what is going to really help you to move forward when you do create new drawings, is don't try to relayer things the way that we had done them for the section on the side. What you can do, because you've already done a lot of the work, you can just basically pull these elements across and you can really speed up what you're busy working on. So first of all, just to give myself a little bit of extra space, I'm going to draw in these temporary lines and I'm going to trim away what is not necessary. I'm going to delete these parts that basically go off the bounds of my drawing. And I'm now going to copy and then rotate the entire section the way we have it on the side. So I'm going to just take that entire drawing, including the context, and I'm going to just copy it all the way down. And this is going to be a temporary copy that I'm later then going to delete. And it's quite important as well to note which copies you are using temporarily and which ones you are actually going to be keeping. So generally when I'm doing something temporary, what I will do is I'll put a rectangular box around it, so REC enter. And generally as well, I will draw a diagonal line through the entire thing. And this will then just show me that this is my temporary drawing and I can copy paste things out of it, but I know that I'm not actually going to be printing or presenting this drawing. So what we're going to do now is to line up the two different drawings. So also I don't need too much of this information on the side. You can now go and just reduce the entire drawing. So let's just go and trim away what we don't need here. And I'm going to delete this as well. Remember too that we have two different types of layering systems. Basically, everything in our section has got a section prefix. So if we have a look at, for example, these elements, it says section tower, whereas when we click on this, it says elevation tower. So do know as well that if you simply go and match properties between the two, you're also going to be changing the layer's name, and this sometimes might not be what you want. If, however, you don't want to keep everything equal and you just want to call everything tower or everything elevation or anything with a similar name, then you definitely can use that match property command with much more ease. So here as well, I'm going to just delete this away and then just squash that and move it inwards. So that's using the stretch command using S. So now I'm going to draw a temporary line out from the top of this plinth, and I'm going to move this temporary section of mine using the top of that plinth as a snapping point, and I'm going to basically apply it to that. So now the two drawings are exactly in line, and you can just go and do a couple of tests. You can take a top of your tower, just draw a temporary line and basically have a look that it does all line up. It should more or less be correct. You can see here that the top of the tower is where this point is. So everything has been lined up pretty accurately. And what we want to do right now is to copy all of the elements. So I'm going to just temporarily hide or freeze the back context so that I'm only looking at the building, and I'm now going to start copying these elements across. So CO to copy, and just go and copy all of the height lines that we worked on in the previous couple of lessons and all of the grid lines. And let's go and copy that across to here. So what we want to do right now is, before we overlay the grid lines on top of the building, let's just move the height lines into place, and we need to now decide where exactly these grid lines are going to be in our case. So same thing happens here, where you want to take the edge of your expo block in plan and you want to draw it down. This is where it's going to end up. So basically this little line here, all of it's lining up neatly, and all of the grid lines are going to start from there. And I do believe that when we made this, that the actual grid was exactly square. In other words, the square that is holding up this pyramid is going to be equal in the length and the width. So you can also go and double check that back in your model, or you can have a look at what your engineers tell you as to what to do. So I'm now going to use this green line that I've just pulled in for myself, and I'm going to pull all of this across and snap it to that line. Now remember that you can't keep the A, B, C, D as you had done for the section. You're going to have to renumber that, and if we are looking at this drawing upside down now, the A is going to be in this corner and the 1 will be here. In other words, we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 going from left to right. Remember that we're looking at this upside down. So that means that this A is going to get changed into a 1. So let's just double click on that, type 1, and we're just going to go across and renumber that. So I'm going to do that as well in my own time. And similarly, we can go and copy any grid lines that are missing here. So let's just copy this one here. And equally so, let's go and copy all of these grid lines, including the dimensions. And let's just go and add all of that to the side. Remember that you do want to copy all of the circles with the lettering or the numbering as well. So let's just go and copy this for ourselves once again. Just deselecting the long dimension so that we don't have that repeated too many times, and there we go. Now these last ones can get deleted and it goes up to there. So this long dimension line can now get stretched all the way across to the end. And this basically is going to cover our entire building. I'm not too worried about having any grid lines beyond the expo building, since all of that is just regarded as landscaping, because it's all just quite organically spaced objects. There isn't actually any structural grid holding up this, besides the structural grid that there may be in the platform or the podium itself, but we're not really worried about that for our purposes. So now your grid is in place, you can basically continue working on this, and I'm not necessarily going to do everything on camera in front of you, but the same thing will apply as we had done before. Basically, you want to see what is obscuring what, and you want to start trimming away what you're not going to see. So, for example, this main facade is going to be covering the tower. The tower is not going to be exposed like it is in this section when we're cutting through the tower. So then in this case, we need to just create a temporary rectangle for ourselves. So REC, enter to create that. Let's now go and just isolate out those objects. I'm going to use the trim command, select that rectangle, and let's just go and trim away everything on the inside and then delete all of the smaller segments within that. Then I'm going to delete that temporary line, undo my layer isolate, and you can see that in a couple of seconds we've already now removed that. So the same thing is going to happen to these columns over here. They're going to disappear. Here it's already obscured because when we did the snapshot we had both of these small pavilions as well as these columns together, so they have already pretty much merged themselves quite well. Also, we have this bridge in the background and we can see it coming up here, so all of that will have to be trimmed away as well, since we're not going to see it unless you really want to consider that in between these wooden lattices you would want to see something, but it's generally not ideal to show too much information on top of each other, otherwise it's going to get confusing. So I'm going to leave this lesson right there. I've basically shown you how you can take certain things across. So remember that the same thing can now happen with your layers. If you do want to have a more monotonous layer structure where you don't separate your section and your elevation, then remember that you have the MA for match properties command, so you can just match properties all of the colors and the lines across into this drawing. Otherwise, what you want to think about is that you won't necessarily be always using the same color. In other words, your podium in your elevation is not going to be this magenta color because you're not cutting through it. So keep that in mind, that it's not one object equals one color. The color represents how thick it's going to be drawn. In other words, how close is it to where you're viewing it from, and that is what you want to keep in mind when you're doing those line weights. So in our case, the thing that we want to represent the most is going to be this podium. And that podium in our case can be yellow, and we can also make this entire facade front yellow so that we read this box standing out a little bit forward and coming towards us on top above this podium. So those are going to be the two objects that can then get colored. But all of that I'll do in my own time, since it is quite fidgety, and you don't need to see me layering those things because we had already done it in a previous lesson. So that is it for now. As I mentioned, just to recap for the last time, we've basically gone and used shortcuts by pulling in as much information from previous drawings to speed up our current drawing. So let's go now into the next lesson where we start to add a little bit more information to these three drawings. We're going to start making them visually more attractive as well. A couple of more details that are still required here, and we're going to just fill in all those missing gaps before we add more things such as hatching or any other north arrows and all those other fundamentals that need to be there. So join me for that in the next couple of lessons as we fill up our 3 plans, sections, and elevations as we do the work.